Are you somebody that recently has contemplated just sort of quitting songwriting? Or maybe you are a person that is kind of afraid deep down that you told everybody, ooh, I'm a songwriter now, I write songs now, and that in 2 years you're gonna be somebody who is just sort of like, I don't do that anymore. Well, this is the video for you. We're gonna talk about 3 ways to make sure you quit songwriting, which of course means really what we're talking about is how to avoid these 3 things so you don't quit songwriting. Let's talk about it. One great way to make sure you quit songwriting is to try to write sophisticated songs before you are ready. For some reason, this is something that seemingly nobody likes to be told, but it's just kind of obviously true. Most people, when they try to become a coffee drinker when they're 18, 19, 20, they don't usually start with black coffee. They usually are like, well, I'll get that Starbucks sugary drink that has like 2 shots of espresso that I can barely taste. And then eventually they kind of move into, you know what, I can do iced coffee, which at least is more coffee, but it's still like more creamer or milk or something than it is anything else. And then eventually they drink black coffee with 2 creams and 2 sugars, and then they're like, you know what, I don't need that much sugar, I'll just do the creamer instead. And then eventually you get to black coffee. Not everybody does it that way, but that tends to be the way things go. And then for everything else in life, we learn in stages. We first learned to crawl before we could learn to walk. I have a 15-month-old daughter. We didn't just say like, okay, Sierra, run. Like, no, she had to learn to crawl first, and then once she learned to crawl and really got that down, then she started to learn to walk. And now she's starting to learn to run because she's pretty good at walking now. That's just how everything in life goes. So I don't know why people don't like to be told this obvious truth. It's true of like everything. We had training wheels before we rode a bike on 2 wheels. We could talk about like thousands and millions of examples of this, but it's also true for songwriting. Learning something new is hard enough as it is. We don't want to artificially inflate how difficult it is by just refusing to acknowledge the reality of how people learn things, which is usually relatively slowly and in stages. We all learn to crawl before we learn to walk. We all learn to walk before we learn to run. And for the most part, in songwriting, it should be the same thing. If you don't have a music theory background, if you don't know that much about poetry, to already skip to like trying to do advanced poetic concepts, and you're using Phrygian mode and using borrowed chords and all that sort of thing, you don't even know major and minor yet. So how can we possibly skip to something that's way more advanced? And look, I'm not telling you that like you need to wait 5 years before you can use a mode. No, I don't think it takes that long. I think even 6 months can be plenty if you're intentional about learning as you write songs. So it's not this sort of gatekeeping thing where it's like you need to spend 6 years writing before you can do anything interesting. No, but I certainly think you should at least write 1 song with maybe a stock chord progression first, and then write 1 song where you come up with a chord progression that's all in key, and you start to understand, okay, what's a major key, what's a minor key, how does it work? And then maybe be like, okay, I understand major and minor, now let's try to understand modes. That is perfectly legitimate. So maybe your first song with modes is song 4 or 5 or 6. I think that's a little bit aggressive, but you know, I think that can be done. But just skip straight to that and you're like, oh, I'm too good to learn music theory, but also I want to be able to utilize music theory. I just don't want to learn it. Is like, you can't have both. That's doublethink, right? I'm going to use advanced music theory concepts in my song, but I refuse to learn any music theory. Doesn't go together. Which brings us to point 2, which is one great way to make sure that we quit songwriting is to refuse to grow as we go. So what do I mean by that? I basically mean the person that's at the opposite end of the spectrum of the first person that we, I guess, kind of picked on. I didn't really mean to pick on you, but like, the truth needs to be told here. This is the person that just really wants to stay a baby songwriter forever. They never want to move past basic chord progressions. They never want to actually learn anything about lyric writing or how to maybe construct a story better. They want to write songs as quickly as possible. They don't want to be bothered with learning anything. They want to be told that they can write the greatest songs ever without ever learning a thing. That type of person is another type of person that is likely to quit. And part of why they're likely to quit is because they refuse to learn as they go. If you're 3 years into songwriting and you still just use the same stock chord progressions over and over, you're probably gonna think, wow, songwriting's kind of boring. It's the same thing over and over. No, your version of songwriting got boring because you never grew. That's like saying, hey, it's kind of boring to just crawl around everywhere. It's really slow. When you're 18 and you finally realized, hey, maybe I should have leveled up and learned to walk and learned to run. Because once we learn to run and walk, we don't go back to crawling. I don't know about you, but I don't crawl very often anymore. And I think in songwriting, it's pretty similar. I really almost never will open a song with like, I'm gonna pick a stock chord progression. Once in a while, almost like as an experiment or a back to basics or like a challenge to myself to make it as simple as possible or write a song as quickly as possible, maybe for reasons like that. But for most songs, it's boring to me. I would never even want to write a song that way again because once you get past that, it's kind of boring. If you are bored of songwriting, that's one reason why people quit. And there's really no reason to be bored of songwriting unless you aren't growing as you go. If you're not leveling up in your understanding of how to tell a story, how to construct lyrics, maybe even just a different way to structure your song, maybe you just do verse, chorus, bridge, chorus over and over again, and you've never even contemplated utilizing another song structure, or the refusal to learn any music theory, which is a big one. All of those sorts of things are like, that's fine, but just know you're probably setting yourself up to quit at some point because it's going to get boring. If you picked up carpentry and all you ever did was construct boxes, eventually you'd be like, wow, carpentry is boring. It's trash. Why does anybody like doing this? I'm just building boxes over and over again. Like, yeah, but there's way more to carpentry than that. You're the one who chose to limit yourself to just like boxes over and over again. Of course that would get boring. Anybody would get bored of that. But the problem isn't carpentry. The problem is your approach to carpentry with the refusal to learn and to sort of push yourself and to get outside of your comfort zone. And a third way to make sure we quit songwriting is really just to get into it for the wrong reasons. If for some reason you think that songwriting is the easiest path to money or fame or some girl thinking that you're cool or whatever ulterior motive you have, you're probably gonna quit. Because that's just not a good reason. If the only reason that I wrote songs was to get rich and famous, I almost certainly would have quit by now. Because I'm 31, I'm not rich and famous, I still love songwriting. I love songwriting now more than I loved it when I first started, when I was like, I don't know, 12, 13, 14. I love it more now. Because I actually love the craft itself. I love songwriting. I love all the learning of different things around songwriting. I love the challenge of getting better at different concepts that are central to songwriting, like storytelling and lyric writing and music theory, but I also really like learning about things that are kind of tangential. I really like getting into arranging of songs, because I arrange my own songs too. So I'm really interested in that element as well. And that's what keeps it interesting. If you just want songwriting because we want this girl to like you, or you want to get rich and famous, which by the way, really rich from songwriting, you pick something else. Pick something else. So if you're in it for the fame or some other ulterior motive, you're better off just going for like, I don't know, being in the NFL or something, because you're just as likely to be successful with that kind of mindset where you just want the result, you don't actually want the journey. And by the way, you're probably gonna quit the first time somebody hits you in the mouth. So it will take like, I don't know, the first 5 seconds of football practice for you to be like, you know what? Nah, don't do that to yourself for songwriting. This probably is almost none of you watching. But look, if you are somebody that actually falls into this camp and you know in your heart of hearts that you picked up songwriting for the wrong reason, I think if you reevaluate, you can maybe come to the conclusion, you know what? Initially I thought that I wanted it because I just like the idea of being on stage and everybody knowing my name or something silly like that. But really think about it. Is there maybe more to your desire to write songs? Because there probably is. And then lean into that instead of thinking about the results. Don't be so results driven, and instead think about your love of the craft, how you can get better at the craft, and that will be more sustainable. But again, probably for most of you, this last one didn't apply, which is a great thing, because caring about the craft of songwriting itself is going to be the thing that sustains you. If you haven't already, be sure to grab my free guide, 20 different ways to start writing a song. This is a great way to jumpstart your songwriting. This is a great way to not get stuck in your songwriting, doing the same thing over and over and starting to get bored of your songwriting process, or starting to get bored of the same old chords that you keep starting every song with, because this is 20 different ways to start writing a song, and I find that just starting songs from different standpoints is a great way to stay creatively fresh, and also is just a great way to just continue to enjoy songwriting, because there's something much more fun and playful about the fact that I know maybe next time I start writing a song, I'm gonna go sit at the piano and I'm just gonna improvise something in D major until I come up with an interesting piano hook. But then for the next song, I'm gonna actually grab my guitar and try to come up with a finger picking pattern that I think's kind of interesting before even thinking about chords. And then the next one, I'm actually gonna grab my bass guitar or go back to the keyboard and try to write a bass part on the keyboard. And then the song after that, I'm just gonna sit around and think about what's a really cool image so I can reverse engineer a song from that. All of those are wildly different and will get some different results and will keep me engaged creatively because it's interesting, it's different, and you may be surprised because right now you may think, oh, the only way I've ever written songs is starting with a chord progression. But after trying different ways to start songs, you might realize actually that's not even one of the better ways to start a song. I almost never start a song with a chord progression. I find that for me personally, it's one of the weakest ways to start a song. The same might be true for you, but you will never know if you don't try different ways to start writing a song. So be sure to check that out, songwritertheory.com/free guide. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate every single one of you. I'll talk to you in the next one.